Good morning everyone, welcome to another Live at the Waterhole session on this fine Sunday. It's a little overcast and breezy in Hoedspruit, but I'm sure our cams will be full of great sightings and pleasant weather. It's myself, Kenneth Gamble. I'll be your guide for the session, and as always the show is live and interactive, so please feel free to pass through your questions and comments and I'll do my best to answer them. We have of course been starting off today with one of Africa's quite well known waterfowl, the Egyptian goose, which over some of the sessions we have discussed that it is actually a type of shell duck and not necessarily a goose. Diving further into that, your shell duck, I think the most layman way of describing it would be the in-between form, or what you would get if you were in the middle between being a goose and a duck. That is essentially what a shell duck is. I saw a little seed eater there flitting about. Of course, we know the bird watching is always quite great here at Lentor. I must say, actually, the last while, I don't know if everyone's maybe a bit more perceptive, but there's been some incredibly great birding sightings. I know a lot of the drives, there's been a couple amazing sightings. And it is such a fascinating part of nature that we get to enjoy. You can see this goose just foraging away, looking for some algae, or not so much invertebrates. They are more they are herbivores, but just filtering away and getting in its Sunday feeding. Actually quite picturesque, not having the geese with their harsh call. It's also nice with this view we have here at Lentor. One can kind of appreciate the striking patterns and markings that these Egyptian geese have. Normally when we see them, it's from a bit of a greater distance, and I think also we don't really get to see the detail necessarily. For me, their eye is always very striking. It's quite a bold color that stands out. Moonlight to midnight, you're asking if all birds, including ducks and geese, have a sense of smell. They do. We can see their nostrils on their beaks. I wouldn't say it's a very acute sense of smell. Birds rely quite extensively on hearing, so audio cues and visual cues. Their eyesight is also incredibly sensitive. It's the same way birds can also see in other visual spectrums. So it's not by scent that they track down flowers, but actually they pick up the ultraviolet colors, etc. And also the way we see their feathers or markings, although very pretty to us, looks completely different to them. So they can definitely smell, but it's not one of their heightened senses, I would say. Amanda, you're hoping for some awesome sightings today. That makes 2 of us, but I must say, I think we're already starting off well with a spot of bird watching. Maybe we can get a few more people to jump on the bird watching bus. On that note as well, I see Wild Earth is doing very well in the Birding Life Awards for YouTube Channel of the Year. I think it's some exciting stuff, nail biting to see who will take the title. Fingers crossed for Wild Earth, of course. If I look at some of the birds that we often get on either live at the waterhole or even on the drives, there's some really truly stunning birds that are seen. And what's quite nice is a nice learning perspective to it. Well, I'm sure we'll be back here a bit later, but we're going to go over to Safari Hook for a bit. Ooh, wow, this is quite an awesome gathering. Springbok and Abdom storks. Now, I would be assuming that the Abdoms are maybe starting to move a bit more north, while summer is still in full swing in southern Africa. It is certainly approaching autumn ever so slightly. I can see a few changes in the bush. Of course, that's a combination of a lack of rain since the floods. Always quite entertaining or interesting, I would say, how one can go from one of the two extremes to too much water, flood damage, etc., as we've all seen with the Kruger recovery funds, etc., that are required to repair the park. And I think, yeah, the last 3 weeks we've had almost zero rain. We have had a little bit now over the weekend, but very interesting how there's two sides of the scale. But of course, yeah, once these Abdom storks are done staying in southern Africa, they'll head up north back towards the equator. They are intra-African migrants, so they move with the rain and the seasons throughout the continent. And of course the Springbok themselves are not going anywhere. They'll continue to stay here, but it's looking quite nice and vibrant here at Safari Hook, a lot more than the last time I think we watched lions here. That was probably about 2 weeks ago or so, and would like to say it almost looks a bit more vibrant and lush. I just love the colours also on these abdomen stalks. They, well, I guess with most birds, there's always that beauty that one only really starts to appreciate when you get up close to them, or you spend time watching them for quite a long period, and you start to notice the subtle differences or markings they have, like the blue and pink markings on the face of the abdomen stalk. Whereas just with a normal glance you would assume that it's pretty much a black and white bird. Of course, just a very curious springbok there, but quite an idyllic day here at Safari Hook. It's nice to see that Etosha is actually also looking quite green and vibrant, considering, aside from the fires that happened last year, but it really was looking quite dry. I was a bit worried, because when it's already looking that dry, so well, in the middle of the wet season, there's always a concern how it will be for the animals later on into the dry season itself. But that is the cycle of things. Not every year is a bountiful year. Quite entertaining watching the storks and the springbok trying to navigate around one of each other. They're not necessarily, they don't appear to be too scared of each other, but both trying to move out of each other's way. And I guess the storks are also just taking it quite a bit, or quite easy today, just resting in their flock, preening a bit, and overall not busy with too much else. Lisa, you'd like to know what their nests are like, or their nesting habits, pardon me. So they nest more south of the Sahara. It's more where their nesting is. They just come down to southern Africa for the rains. So the storks obviously pair up and they stay bonded as a pair. But normally, I wouldn't say it's large colonies like we'd maybe be used to with herons or egrets. More specifically, smaller colonies with nests in a smaller grouping like that. And then the nest itself is a wide stick platform, as any other stork nest generally appears to be, decorated with grass, leaves, fur and rubbish, etc. I was reading in my field guide now that apparently they, aside from using structures, they'll use cliffs and baobabs as well, so that's quite interesting. It's always quite interesting how a lot of, I think it's more your large, well actually no, a lot of birds in general will in a way make nests around human habitation, kind of the way in which we see weavers, etc., building nests near in trees on at waterholes, etc., that are kind of surrounded by a moat essentially. So a lot of your herons and your storks, a few other urban birds will also build their nests in city centres, because essentially it's a very safe way or safe place to raise their chicks. There's no predators, fortunately, unfortunately, and that way humans keep predators away. So it's a score for the birds, but obviously not the most natural of settings. But it's amazing how adaptive birds can be to make use of a niche like that. Often in my travels, in more rural parts of the countries, I've seen quite a few heronries in the middle of transport hubs where the buses and taxis gather, and seems like quite an unlikely place, but it's great for the herons to raise their young. I'm sure these springbok are getting quite well nourished off all this green grass around the waterhole here. I think they're really making the most of it. That being said, they obviously are looking for the small nutritious shrubs. I think there is a bit of a weed growth around here, those larger leafed plants, so that will not be palatable to them, but they just graze around that. Victor, you'd like to know if climate change affects the ways in which, or affects the migration of birds. Of course it certainly does. Can result in less birds returning to a certain area if the rains have not been good. Only a few might make the full pilgrimage, but a lot of birds, as they migrate, they're dependent on the rain as they go through. Well, depends once again. Some birds do it one shot non-stop, and some of the other birds move with the rain as the seasons progress, and they come down like that. But essentially, if you had let's say maybe a rain failure in a certain area and there's no food or anything to really keep the birds on, they may turn back, may not complete the migration. It may result in increased mortality on the journey, which can affect the entire season for the birds. I know, for example, this year a lot of people have been saying in the Kruger Park they seem to be seeing more European rodents, which is quite a positive thing. Now, I don't know what the reason for that would necessarily be. I think I would obviously tie it to maybe the very good rains we've had and an abundant insect life, etc., post floods. So that might be nourishing and enabling the European rodents to continue with their migration down into southern Africa. And that's necessarily a benefit. Obviously there can be a lot of negative occurrences or influences. Anyway, we're going to leave our lazy abdom stalks and head on back to Lentor. Oh, that was a nice little visit. Sorry, I was just paying attention a bit. Very striking starting. Hopefully he comes back. Okay, our starting has done a runner there. We're going to head over to Tembe, see if he maybe comes back later. Ooh, certainly a very gusty day in Tembe. So quite reminiscent, well, very similar to the weather we're having in the Lowveld as well. Is slightly due to a hurricane system that's come across from Madagascar and is headed into Mozambique. It doesn't look like it'll push too much deeper, so I think a sigh of relief from a lot of people in and around the Kruger area. We certainly have had more than enough rain, and a hurricane is probably not something we need right now.
When nature calls, Maui is the only answer. Satisfy your wanderlust and take to the open road in one of our fully equipped motorhomes. Boasting a fridge, gas stovetop, AC and bathroom, our motorhomes are comfortable and spacious, making any self-drive adventure in the Kruger or garden route memorable. Whether you travel alone, as a couple or the whole family, Maui has a motorhome for you. Maui, home where you roam.
Impact Foundation is a non-profit that uses the power of wildlife storytelling as a force for good. We create sustainable development projects that showcase conservation stories, empower people, and inspire environmental action. As a registered South African PBO, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Wild Earth Impact Foundation. To find out more, visit our website.
When adventure calls, answer with Brits. Take on Southern Africa's most breathtaking landscapes from behind the wheel of a fully equipped 4x4 or SUV. From tents and bedding to a fridge and full kitchen gear, everything you need is already on board. And with 24-hour roadside assistance, you're free to go further and explore with confidence. Open roads, total freedom, no limits, just the journey ahead. Brits, equipped for adventure.
So we have a sneaky elephant at the back there, blending in perfectly with his bum towards us. And of course the ever-present woolly neck storks. This is not a migratory stork, so you're likely to see them all year round. I would even suggest these are generally the same storks we always see. So they move from area to area, but I think these woolly neck storks have got quite a nice location. I don't think they necessarily leave it too often. I also think I see some hardy-dar ibises at the back there. But yeah, it does look quite windy today, Tembe. There's a nice example of no matter the weather, it's always a good time to go look at animals, or maybe just change your modus operandi and sit somewhere where the wind won't bother you too much, but there's always something to enjoy. The birds do certainly seem to be taking cover though. Moonlight at midnight, you'd like to know if we ever see snakes at any waterholes, either drinking or in the area. I've never seen a snake while doing live at the waterhole. I think we've had a few monitor lizards. Personally, around my house, I've seen a few snakes moving around the bird bath, etc. I think it's something you tend to see a little bit more in the dry season. I think we're not often used to seeing snakes drinking, but they will drink, and they do need to drink from water. But I think at the end of the day, most of your reptiles are such not cryptic but shy and stealthy creatures. It's easy for them to go unnoticed, especially snakes. They are always around us, and there's no need for us to be fearful, but just respectful of them and cautious in the environment. But I have actually walked into a snouted cobra once when I went to fill up my bird baths. Luckily I saw the snake well before there was any issues, but it's a reminder to be very awake when you're out in the bush. There's obviously a premium mud spot there. These two bulls are rubbing shoulders a bit for it, or competing. It seems to be a bit of dominance also taking place. I'm not sure why they both want to stand there. I'm sure there's plenty of space for everyone, but maybe there's something unique about the mud in that little location. We've got quite a gathering of elephants popping out of the sand forest now. It's amazing how they just melt out, or almost appear out of the bush, but just shows you how thick and impenetrable the bush is at Tembe. And essentially this little pan gives you a window into the lives of the animals here. Caleb, you'd like to know if elephants can recognize themselves in mirrors? So yeah, they are one of the very few animals that have been shown to recognize themselves in a mirror. In some controlled studies, when a visible mark was placed on an elephant's head, the elephant used the mirror to inspect and touch that mark on its own body. So that clearly paints a picture that they're able to recognize it is themselves and investigate it on themselves. If they weren't, they would obviously reach out to the mirror instead. So that kind of behavior does suggest self-recognition, which is considered the sign of advanced cognitive ability or intelligence, as we humans like to call it. But it makes sense. We know elephants are incredibly intelligent creatures, and there is more than meets the eye. Anyway, we're going to leave these elephants and head on over to Naledi Bush Lodge for a bit. Ooh, this is a nice close-up. Not necessarily a real elephant party, but more a drinking party. Of course, the inlet here at Naledi is quite unique in the way that it's built up almost in the shape of a well. That is of course done to just protect it from the elephants, that they don't damage it. I think in a way it's also quite nice though, because more animals can access it. It's not one small specific pipe. And then of course its overflow flows into a pan on the left here. These ellies are looking quite happy and relaxed today. It actually looks quite pleasant in that part of the world. You can also see the wind is blowing a bit there, but nothing too insane. Certainly see this was just a small quick pit stop for some water, and everyone's back on the go. Obviously it's not too warm in the Kruger region today, so splashing around is not high on the agenda. I would actually even say it's maybe a little cold for that. And everyone's just going to carry on with their feeding routine and back to business. Yeah, no, these elephants are on a beeline to get somewhere. They haven't got time to waste. When you see an elephant walking like this, you know they've got somewhere to be. The female has quite a, well, the fact that her tail's almost parallel, quite outstretched, would signal a bit of displeasure. I'm not sure if they could maybe smell something in the area, possible that there are lions, etc. But something is certainly made them unhappy, or they're not necessarily pleased with the situation. Anyway, it was a nice quick one. We're going to head on over to Aldonio. Well, now this is quite a gathering of elephant bulls. Truly staggering how quickly the scenery is changing week by week here at Aldonio. It's looking much drier each week. That lush vegetation that surrounded the waterhole seems to be disappearing quite rapidly. Sorry about that, guys. We just lost the connection there. The feed froze, and we just hopped on over back to Safari Hook. Of course, the Egyptian geese serenading us here a bit, and the ever-present Abdon storks taking it quite chilled. It's really amazing seeing the different roosting postures. There's some birds, obviously storks lie a bit on their legs, and you've got some doing the one-legged stance, which is obviously a unique adaptation that birds have to resting. I certainly would not be able to stand too long on my one leg, and I don't find it a restful pose. Maybe some of the viewers are more into yoga and Pilates might find that relaxing. And even the way they sleep with their heads tucked in, it's also amazing. It doesn't look incredibly comfortable, but of course they are just superbly adapted for these changes. It seems like quite a few of the Abdom storks are choosing to quench their thirst. It doesn't necessarily look like the most effective way of drinking, but they have to make do. Of course, doves and pigeons are some of the only birds that can actually drink or sip water up without raising their head. Other birds need to scoop it into their beaks. And the vegetation growth has been quite significant here at Safari Hook. Clearly must have had quite a bit of rain the last while. This is not something that will happen after 1 or 2 showers. You can see this dense shrubbery, not the one necessarily in the background, but it's around the springbok and it's also in front of the camera. That's known as a thorn apple. It is considered an invasive or a weed in agriculture, and to my knowledge is considered an invasive plant through most of southern Africa. It's not too hard to control. Normally it's quite easy to just pull it out of the ground, and you'll just have to repeat this practice for a couple of seasons before the seed bank is depleted. But yeah, if left unchecked, it grows quite sporadically in one specific spot, and it just outcompetes any grazing. But you also, once again, generally find it in disturbed areas. I always say it's maybe a bit of a curse if one has a bit of a knowledge of plants and invasive plants. You tend to notice these things, and I think they bother knowledgeable plant people a bit more than other nature enthusiasts. KG, you'd like to know what the number one predator for impala at Safari Hook is? I don't think there's one specific one. Of course, leopards, cheetahs, lions, all of them will happily take on impala. And I think you would find that between the impala and the springbok, they are probably some of the most heavily preyed on animals here. Lions obviously won't specialize or put a lot of energy into trying to hunt impala, but they will obviously always take the opportunity if it arises. It obviously just doesn't go very far to feeding a pride of lions. But leopards and cheetahs will specifically hunt impalas. That's their bread and butter. Of course, in this situation you also have springboks, so they would also be on the menu. It's not often that you are in an area in southern Africa where springbok and impala occur side by side. Normally the two are in quite different and separate habitats. I was so deep in thought for a second I didn't even notice the zebra that just strolled in. It seems like just the two of them. I don't see many other animals or any other zebras for that matter. Looking quite relaxed, however. And there we go, that makes more sense. The rest of the herd seems like they were drinking more to the right there, and they're slowly just moving around the waterhole now. These of course are your Birchall zebra or your plain zebra, not the Hartman's mountain zebra like we saw the one time. Of course, still very pretty and unique. Nina, you'd like to know, why do young male zebras leave the herd to form bachelor groups? Well, obviously as they become older, they reach sexual maturity and they too themselves want to start mating and being in charge themselves. So of course in a situation like that, they challenge the dominance of the stallion that's in charge of that herd, or that is his harem, and he will of course not tolerate that at all. So generally results in fighting. Of course a young zebra at that stage has got no hope of beating a mature stallion, so he's often run away or chased off, and then they in turn form these bachelor herds as they grow and develop and learn the ways of being a rough and tough stallion in the African bush. And only then, once they've grown a bit in size and stature and experience, will they maybe themselves return to challenge a stallion for the right to have their own herd. I wanted to say you might tolerate a younger animal that's not being challenging, etc., or challenging his dominance, but zebras tend to fight quite a bit, so I don't think you would even tolerate that for very long. And it's quite instinctual for a lot of animals, so even at the best of times, it's not like it would stay there trying to behave itself. It would be quite a natural phenomenon for them to move off and do their own thing. I must say, between these zebras and Springbok, the waterhole here is going to have quite a well-kept lawn. I'm going to keep it quite short, of course. The Springbok will be quite good at cropping the grass and keeping it evenly trimmed. Unfortunately, zebra, when they graze, they tend to pull entire plants out. Anyway, it's been nice here at Safari Hook. We're going to go over to Stony Point for a bit. We have some enigmatic dassies here, or rock hyraxes. Very cute animals. Some of my favorites. I could watch them for hours on end. I have, of course, also been the sensation of many social media memes, but they are, of course, very entertaining animals. Quite a rodent-like in appearance, but actually their closest living relative is the elephant itself. I think a fact that most people are aware of, but still very interesting nonetheless. Just a question before we left Safari Hook. Zoe, you were asking how fast can a zebra sprint when a cheetah or lion is chasing it. So a zebra can run about 60 to 65 kilometers per hour in short bursts. Obviously that top speed cannot be maintained for very long. Definitely not as fast as a cheetah, but at the same time very rare that a zebra would run from a cheetah. A cheetah is not strong enough to bring down a full-grown zebra. Maybe a foal, but even in a situation like that, the mother zebra would fight quite aggressively and would actually harm the cheetah quite seriously. It would be quite a challenge for them to get hold of that foal. It does definitely happen, but they would have to be quite sneaky. Yeah, I do agree. Dassies are incredibly cute. It's
When nature calls, Maui is the only answer. Satisfy your wanderlust and take to the open road in one of our fully equipped motorhomes. Boasting a fridge, gas stovetop, AC and bathroom, our motorhomes are comfortable and spacious, making any self-drive adventure in the Kruger or garden route memorable. Whether you travel alone, as a couple or the whole family, Maui has a motorhome for you. Maui, home where you roam.
Join me at Mabula Private Game Reserve from 6 to 11 May 2026 for a 5-night private safari for just 6 guests.
Just incredibly exciting.
Enjoy guided walks, take part in rhino conservation efforts, and explore Mabula's beautiful landscapes from open plains to rocky hills, alive with birds, animals, and vibrant plant life.
When adventure calls, answer with Brits. Take on Southern Africa's most breathtaking landscapes from behind the wheel of a fully equipped 4x4 or SUV. From tents and bedding to a fridge and full kitchen gear, everything you need is already on board. And with 24-hour roadside assistance, you're free to go further and explore with confidence. Open roads, Total freedom, no limits, just the journey ahead. Brits, equipped for adventure.
Has not necessarily an elephant's tusks, but it certainly does get you thinking maybe what their common ancestor once upon a time looked like, or why they share some of these very distant traits. Also, if I'm not mistaken, their toes are also quite uniquely, or their pads, etc., are quite uniquely shaped, which is where that common ancestry comes in. But I must say that looks quite pleasant of a way to spend a Sunday on the warm, toasty rocks, with a brilliant view over the ocean, I'm sure, and just letting the day tick past. Of course, I'm sure their neighbours can be a bit noisy, the penguins, but I'm sure there's worse things to live with in life. I'm sure we don't see it too often on the cameras, but it's always quite entertaining watching them hop about. They are incredibly agile creatures on the rocks. That one little disappearing act on us. But I do think the camera would struggle at the best of times to keep up with them bounding across the rocks. So it's quite a peaceful setting between watching the dassies and hearing those peaceful sounds of the waves crashing. One could almost drift away. That's possibly why the dassies always seem to be sleeping, exposed to all that white noise. It lulls them into a sense of wanting to sleep the whole time. So we got a kelp gull there running past, obviously looking for scraps on the beach. Penguins are clearly out foraging today. Water looks very inviting. Of course, the Atlantic Ocean is incredibly cold though, so I would not be caught dipping a toe in there. Anyway, that's a nice stop. We're going to head over to the Hyrax's bigger cousins at Tembe Elephant Park again. See, the elephant gathering is still in strong swing here. The coveted mud hole at the back is being very much utilized. Someone's lying down in it. But otherwise quite a peaceful day here at Tembe, if not for the wind. And there even appears to be some yoga going on there, some stretching taking place, head swinging. I see that young bull that was here when you started the show with his floppy ear, he's still around. So having a nice social session on a Sunday. You can see not too much of a rush. Fortunately in these elephants' case they don't need to travel too far to get to feeding. Quite an abundant amount of things for them to eat around this waterhole. Wow, but it's quite some serious gusts of wind that are blowing through. You can really see these trees swaying in the wind. It's not a little breeze that's coming through. But also why the swallows appear to be moving so quickly. They're getting moved around by these strong gusts of wind. A bit of play fighting taking place. These two younger bulls measuring each other up a little bit. A bit of a dominance reassurance or a bit of test of strength. Doesn't look too serious. Everyone seems to be slowly shifting out or just moving slightly out of view. It seems like everyone just moved to that little open patch there for a little bit. Some further roughhousing combined with some yoga. The bull on the back has gotten onto his back legs for some reason. Old Mr. Floppy Ear seems to be a bit of a brawler. Makes you wonder if that's maybe not how he damaged his ear in the first place. But that's the second tussle he's getting into. Does not seem to be incredibly serious, but I would not say his technique is perfected, that's for sure. Well, this tussle seems to be spiking it. Mr. Floppy Ear seems to be a bit aggressive. I don't know if he's too impressed about being pushed around there. It seems like relatively submissive behavior. All this is quickly escalated from a mere play fight. Raising his head, he's really showing his stature and size. So it looks like for a second he was going to put his tusks on the ground, which is also generally a display of strength. I still don't think this is too serious, but it's getting a bit more less play fighty. Off they go out of screen to carry on their wrestling match. Well, I'm gonna head on over to Lentor. Seems like the wind has blown most things away for now. Yep, the Egyptian geese are still dominating the pond here. Looking quite peaceful and regal, however. I'm actually surprised we don't see Egyptian geese on a more regular occurrence here at Lentor. Considering it is a permanent body of water, you would think they'd almost rely on it a bit more. But anyway, nice to have them. We're just going to head over back to Tembe. There's something going on there. Ooh, the standoff continues. There's certainly a large size disparity here. Can't tell who's Floppy Ear. I have a feeling he's on the left. It's always also a bit challenging to see with the uneven terrain. So one moment they look equal, and then another moment they, well, there's quite a size difference. But apparently Mr. Floppy Ear is very confident in his abilities. I think maybe the battle lines have been drawn. There appears to be a bit of a mark on this elephant's rump there, a white mark or something. I wonder if it's not a old scar or something. Looks like someone might turn tail and run out of here. Very interesting interaction, of course, yeah. Floppy ear is still instigating problems. I'm very suspicious this is a moment of calm before the next round of the fight. But that other elephant bull does look quite a bit larger. And I don't think that fight would go too well. Seems to be another two bulls at the back sizing each other up a little bit. But I guess that is quite normal in spots where all these bulls gather. They are sizing each other up and always asserting their dominance or their place in the hierarchy in the general area. And if not doing that, also gaining a bit of experience. Of course, it's also quite likely there are some bulls and must at the moment, so that can be causing the aggression and the fighting, but I do think if a bull was in must, you would see a lot of other bulls just avoiding in general. Most other bulls don't want to interact or fight with a must bull. Well, there we've got some mounting behavior. Also just the way in which that male is advertising or showing the other bull his dominance. You generally see it with younger bulls, but yeah, essentially he's just cementing his dominance over that other animal now. But it is actually looking rather chaotic. There's elephants in every direction, head swaying, mucking around, etc. Quite a real boys' party, or a bachelor party gone wrong perhaps. And the elephants are very busy here tending. Actually appears as if it's raining a little bit. I thought I saw a few raindrops. David, you'd like to know if there's any documented evidence of game being struck by lightning? Yeah, there is quite a bit of documented cases of wildlife being killed by lightning, even domestic animals, of course. Now, obviously what happens to animals in general holds true domestic or nature. I remember when I grew up as a child, there was a storm where quite a few dairy cows were killed. But obviously where animals are taking shelter in open ground, waterholes, but generally under the trees in which they're sheltering, that can result in them being struck by lightning, or several animals being struck by lightning and killing them. So yeah, it's quite it doesn't happen regularly, but it's a very normal occurrence. And of course in a wide open area, that makes them even more vulnerable, because there's one specific tree that they want to go shelter underneath, which is probably also the highest point in that vicinity. Darkman lover, welcome to the show. Nice to have you here. Well, we're going to leave this elephant wrestling match briefly. I'm just going to go over to lane 2 a bit. Oof, that got quite serious very quickly. Jeez, there's some speed moving through there. Got our grey heron. He's growing up quite nicely. It looks like the young individual that we've seen in the past year. Yeah, I know it looks like we left the elephants at the exciting moment, but they did obviously run straight off screen there and deeper into the thicket. But nonetheless, at least we saw the last bit of it. One of those bulls might actually definitely be in must. It could explain why there's a lot of unease or activity taking place. But it's nice that we can see this grey heron up a bit closer. And if it is the young one that we've seen in the previous couple of weeks here, you can definitely see how he's growing more into his plumage, looking more and more striking. I would assume if he's still here, his fishing technique is improving drastically. I remember it was a bit shaky last time. Also saw a fire finch now for a brief second. There they are, at the back there, also just hanging around in the thick acacia thickets, or chelia. Mr. Heron seems to be taking it very easy, not thinking too much about eating right now, or not necessarily foraging, but it does certainly look like he's very alert and assessing the situation continuously. Melanistic marble, I do agree. You're always very spoilt with bird close-ups here at Lentor. I would almost call it the bird or the birding classroom. You get to see a lot of the more secretive seed eaters come up nice and close, and it also allows us to see some of the plumage markings quite nicely. So, aside from our feathered friends, it's been a bit of a quieter Sunday at Lentor. Not even the baboons have been around. It's probably also why the Egyptian geese are still hanging around here. I'm sure when the baboons come, the geese pack their bags. Although last time we did see how the heron was willing to stay around a bit, or stay around when the baboons were here. Obviously did move off a little bit, but was comfortable enough to stay here. What always surprises me so much is when I see highlights of Lentor, how much cat activity takes place at night here. It's truly amazing. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna leave our waddling goose and head over to Twin Pan. Ooh, that's very pretty. We have a water thickney. Quite well camouflaged at that, I would say. Exactly where you'd expect to see them, but very nicely camouflaged here at the edge of Twin Pan. I almost want to say maybe a bit too close to the water's edge. You never know if a lurking crocodile might try to snap it up. but that is generally what water thickneys do. They roost near the vegetation around a waterhole. Just gonna head on over to Safari Hook again. Feed was a bit jumpy there, so rather come over here where we can keep an eye on our abdomen stalks. I must say nothing too different is taking place. They're all very much happily roosting and preening themselves. I'd love to know what their feeding schedule is, but I'm sure it's generally restricted to the mornings and the late afternoons, and then they spend the heat of the day just cleaning themselves or sunbathing essentially. There's no use in expending energy at the hottest time of the day. But I think it must be quite tough being a stalk that you're essentially always exposed to the sun, where they nest with a full blast of sunshine, the habitats they occupy. It's certainly an easy existence. Then again, they're all covered by feathers, but you can only imagine what it's like under the beating sun. Robin Mack, you're saying there's maybe not as many stalks as there were the other day. I assume it must have been quite a large gathering. It's quite interesting how they gather together and what their schedule or movements is. I know here in Hoedspruit there's a few spots where they get together in a large flock, and then all of a sudden a few will split off and go to another field a few kilometers down the road, and then a few others will pop up at the compost heap near a farm. So it's quite interesting how they fluctuate or how they gather. So they might, the rest might be in the area. We just can't see them necessarily here at the waterhole currently. But I guess it all ties to the food sources they're looking to make use of and where they wish to forage. I actually got quite excited the other day when I saw the local flock. There were some sacred ibises with them, or bin chickens as they are colloquially referred to. Of course, it's not a super rare bird, but not very common in the Kruger or Hoedspruit region, so it was a nice addition for my year list. It's always nice keeping that addiction on the go, seeing how many birds one can see in a calendar year. I think last year I did about 400 and something birds. Be curious to see if I can maybe beat it this year. quite interesting the way that some of these stalks, they don't necessarily lift their entire leg up to rest. It's almost that half mast with it just ever so slightly being off the ground, so they can rest it a little bit. But very entertaining nonetheless. Fungi, I do agree with you, they are stunning birds. It would of course be quite entertaining if they were maybe foraging a bit, but one can certainly still appreciate their beauty while they go on with their natural behaviour.
When nature calls, Maui is the only answer. Satisfy your wanderlust and take to the open road in one of our fully equipped motorhomes. Boasting a fridge, gas stovetop, AC and bathroom, our motorhomes are comfortable and spacious, making any self-drive adventure in the Kruger or garden route memorable. Whether you travel alone, as a couple or the whole family, Maui has a motorhome for you. Maui, home where you roam.
At Wild Earth, we believe every story has the power to create change. That's why we've launched the Wild Earth Impact Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to conservation and social impact. By showcasing conservation stories, we can change lives, protect nature, and empower communities. We have partnered with Empowers Africa to accept tax-deductible donations from US donors. Your donation will help fund critical programs that support our mission. Join us and be part of the change.
Best sighting I've presented, I found myself with wild dogs. We chased the dogs around, chased them around. They ate an impala, we got the end of that. Then another impala went into Gowrie Dam down the road there, and the wild dogs went around. Eventually the impala came close to the bank. One wild dog went and grabbed it and then just pulled it out and just did what wild dogs do. It was an emotional experience, but it was very, very special.
When adventure calls, answer with Brits. Take on Southern Africa's most breathtaking landscapes from behind the wheel of a fully equipped 4x4 or SUV. From tents and bedding to a fridge and full kitchen gear, everything you need is already on board. And with 24-hour roadside assistance, you're free to go further and explore with confidence. Open roads, total freedom, no limits, just the journey ahead. Brits, equipped for adventure.
But yeah, I'm not at that point yet where I'm desperately looking for new lifers. Maybe when my life list is getting quite large, I might start looking for very rare birds or once in a lifetime type of sightings. Shame this young impala is very wary here at the water's edge. You could say it maybe come across crocodiles in its lifetime. It doesn't want to take any chances. Well, as our impala slip off, I'm going to head over to Naledi, see what's going on there. Quite a large herd of elephants. You can see how they're all spread out, typical of feeding behavior. If they haven't got anything specific to be, they'll spread out into this large aggregation. Seems to be a bit of movement taking place now. I don't know if they've also smelt something or they've decided they've got somewhere to be. They are all of a sudden making a beeline. I'm pretty sure I could hear some audio. Something's upset them. You can see another straight out tail, so something's leaving them with a bit of displeasure in the area. This is quite interesting. The elephants on the right don't seem as bothered as the ones on the left. I'm not sure if someone passed on a rude insult or something, but certainly two contrasting reactions, but they all seem to be moving in the same direction. It's very interesting. There does appear to be an elephant behind a tree there, but I don't think that's the source of it. Just one of those mysteries of the bush, I guess. Well, our elephants have disappeared over the crest of that ridge. Off to our next camera location. I was trying to keep it a secret, but I think there's no way of keeping Aldonio under wraps. Quite a beautiful elephant bull there in the middle, very large sweeping tusks. There's two of them with quite large tusks. But quite a congregation taking place around the waterhole here. You can certainly see a fair amount of water is being splashed out by the elephants. You can see it pooling all over the show. Might also be the zebras, of course. But there is normally quite a bit of competition for a drink here at Aldonio. You can also see quite a few birds coming in for a drink. Apologies everyone, we lost our connection there, but at least we saw some of it. Well, at least we can count on our stalks, they're not going anywhere quickly as of yet. Almost all hanging out like a bunch of flamingos. It's funny, I wonder what makes some of them want to stand in the water. I wonder if their feet maybe get a bit hot and it's a great way to cool down. I imagine that probably has something to do with it. Maybe just get their feet off the hot rocks. It's probably a bit more bearable to stand like that. for a brief moment there I thought one of these stalks was maybe tagged, but I think it's actually just the colour of their legs that was misleading. I do see there's an imposter among them. There's an Egyptian goose taking cover, maybe trying to blend in or look like a less noticeable target. Well, so some of these stalks are quite acrobatic, able to drink also only on one leg, further showing the extent of the acrobatic abilities. So some of the legs are looking a little red. I have a feeling it's nothing to do with sunburn, but I can imagine it's incredibly warm at the moment there. Well, I'm going to leave the stalks. I'm sure not much is going to change, and head over to Lentor again. That's very pretty. A beautiful cutthroat finch. It was a fleeting glimpse, but I think we at least all got to see those beautiful colours quite nicely. Probably not gone too far. Of course, the challenge is getting the camera set up in a specific spot. Just combing the water's edge. Maybe we can find another bird to look at, or one of the sneaky seed eaters. Of course, we can count on our grey heron. Seems a bit more awake now. Seems to be lining up a bit of a fishing strategy. I can't remember if we actually have seen this heron catch something at Lentor. I don't think we have, but it'll be quite exciting to see our young grey heron at last catch something on the camera as his fishing skills improve. Obviously he's not around here for nothing, and he's not growing by eating sticks, so I'm sure he's more than a capable hunter nowadays. So the Egyptian goose is certainly giving the heron quite a wide berth there. It's funny, you would almost expect it to rather just swim in the pond than walk around it, but they are actually quite terrestrial. That's kind of the thing that makes shell ducks unique, is they spend a lot more, well, that shell duck family grouping, they spend a lot more time on land and feeding on plants than they would actually necessarily in the water. You can certainly hear quite a few small birds calling, but that's always half the challenge, is actually seeing these small sneaky finches. They are incredibly quick. Like that one, he was there for a few seconds before flying out of frame. Oh, there we go, a bit more movement taking place here. Lots of fire finches off the bat. I think some blue wax, no, those aren't wax balls, those are grey-headed sparrows. Firefinches looking pretty as always. They appear to be red-billed firefinches. The giveaway being, aside from the red bill, they also have a bit of a yellow eye ring, so that's how you know it is a red-billed firefinch. If it is a dark grey blue for this area, it would more than likely be a Jamison's firefinch. And then there's a few other arbitrary, intricate features to look at, but I'd say those are some of the easier ones to use. I must say, these are always one of my favourite birds to watch at a waterhole. I think it's just because it's so hard to actually see them while you're in the bush itself, and a waterhole gives you the little window into observing them or watching them in a bit more of a calmer setting, where they actually come out of the thicket. And generally when you see firefinches, they have this horrible habit of flitting between thick branches and plants, and you just catch small glimpses the whole time, and it gets a little frustrating because you can't figure out what they are or which species specifically. If you're maybe very good on your calls, you would be able to pick it up. I find it a little challenging. I think I need to practice a bit more on my firefinch calls. Firefinches certainly keep coming and going, but at least we're seeing them ever so slightly. Carol, you'd like to know how you identify raptors in flight. So shape goes a long way. I must say there is quite obvious patterns and the wing patterns. I find it a bit challenging sometimes. I often find myself referring back to my field guide when it comes to the vultures and certain eagles, but there are certain diagnostic patterns, but essentially it's a lot about shape, the movement and the behavior. So vultures have a certain way in which they fly. Bateleur, well, they're called bateleurs, but bateleur eagles, they've got very stumpy tails. They almost balance in the way they fly. So there's a couple, I'd say it comes from a bit of experience, but yeah, that shape, movement, etc. Vultures generally don't have very long tails. Eagles tend to have longer tails, so it kind of gives it away. Wing shape plays a role. If the wings are long and narrow, broad and rounded, all types of things like that. Like I said, the tail, is it forked, square, rounded, short? That also leads you further down the track of what you could be looking at. For example, if it was a forked tail, you would know immediately you're looking at a kite, and a very short tail or long wings might be something like a bateleur, and then how it flies. But it's weird because it seems almost very simple and straightforward, but I actually find it a bit challenging sometimes. Sometimes I almost find it easier when the eagles are perched. I think not only is it a bit closer generally, because obviously when they are soaring it can be quite distant, but yeah, I think it also comes with experience and you get better at it. I do find it a little challenging. Leandra, you'd like to know how do I know if a bird is resident or migrant in the reserve? It's a lot about understanding the distribution of the bird. Obviously, with the Live at the Waterhole shows, I've had to become a bit sharp on the East African birds, so I've looked them up a couple of times. So I do roughly know what birds are at certain locations. The Southern African ones are much easier for me, since that's places I've been to myself, and I'm used to the area. But also just being familiar with the bird's habits. If you know it's a migratory bird, if it's a sedentary bird that's found there year round, that will also let you know. But of course, all this information is in various bird guides or resources. Nowadays it's quite nice. There are various free resources like Merlin, which was developed by Cornell University. So it's quite nice. It opens the world of birding to many people. But yeah, it's just about referring to your information and learning it and keeping it at the back of your head. And whenever you're unsure, just open up a field guide or whatever birding app you use. But for example, with the firefinches, I've had to double check which firefinches are found in Kenya, and it's majority Jamison and red-billed firefinch. Also, understanding the habitat you're in goes a long way in giving you an idea what bird you are looking at. For example, African firefinches prefer moister habitats, and we know just from the appearance around this waterhole, although there is water, the habitat itself is not moist. You can see it's dry savanna bushveld, so we wouldn't expect to see birds like that in the area that prefer moister, lush habitats. Hello Wendy, welcome to the show. At least you made it just in time. I am quite happy that the Cape is being blessed by lots of rain at the moment. It was certainly a bit of a touch and go situation. But it's always fantastic to see the miracle of rain and moisture. There's a pretty bird that's slipping in. It's a white-browed sparrow weaver. I thought it was maybe something else. Pretty nonetheless. Very striking with its colours. Oh, looks like a little roadrunner almost. Well, sparrow weaver's a little camera shy, but he hopefully will hop into frame a little bit for us. Moving quite quickly. And of course then you get the polar opposite, the heron, which is almost as still as a statue. One would almost think it is not alive, but that is their whole hunting strategy. The more still you can stand, the better chance you have of grabbing a fish. Eventually they forget you are there. Mason, you'd like to know how do you use binoculars effectively for small birds and trees? I think one key thing is being familiar with your binoculars, so understanding the settings well. Normally when it comes to small birds and trees, you want a bit of a smaller magnification and a bit more of a larger diameter to let more light in. So generally the middle ground or good across all fields is the 10x42 binoculars, but it is generally said amongst birders for more foresty overgrown habitats your 8x42s are maybe a bit better. That lower magnification means you find yourself having to focus less because your magnification is generally perfect for those overgrown situations, and but they're still big enough to let enough light in so you can see the detail. So it gets a bit intricate, but yeah, I think also the other thing, if you know you're going to be birding at a certain distance, try to keep your binoculars set to that focus and you will find yourself spending less time. And another trick, I think it comes a bit more experience, is once you see the bird with your eyes, is in a way keeping your eyes set to that one specific point and sliding the binoculars up without breaking that line of sight. It's quite challenging if you try use your binoculars to search through a tree, whereas if you can set them onto where you are looking, it's a lot easier to see the bird. It gets a bit bewildering if you try relocate it just with the binoculars. But all things that come with practice. Sophia, you'd like to know if hornbills or turacos follow monkey troops for food. No, not necessarily. I think you would actually maybe find advice or the other way around, the monkeys maybe following them a bit more. They would obviously be able to make use of trees and fruits and pods, or fruits and pods and flowers perhaps, on the more delicate branches of a tree that they maybe couldn't get to, and some of that food being knocked down they would feed on. Of course it's not just them, small antelopes and other animals would also make use of the food that they drop. But since birds can fly, they wouldn't rely on the monkeys to drop any food or fruit for them, to make it available to them. They've got the ability to go to the fruits, etc., and get it themselves. Quite an interesting little bird. Looks a bit like a weaver. Yeah, no, that is definitely a weaver. It's unfortunately a female weaver, so it makes it quite challenging to figure out which one specifically it is, because there are quite a few. Female weavers are quite challenging to ID. It takes a few basic things, but since they all look quite similar, you have to carefully comb through the possible species. And there are quite a few weaver species in Kenya that I'm not too familiar with. I'll maybe have a gander at what it could be. Well, all our birds have given us the slip again. I'm going to go on back to Old Faithful and spend a few more moments with our abdom storks at Safari Hook.
When nature calls, Maui is the only answer. Satisfy your wanderlust and take to the open road in one of our fully equipped motorhomes. Boasting a fridge, gas stovetop, AC and bathroom, our motorhomes are comfortable and spacious, making any self-drive adventure in the Kruger or garden route memorable. Whether you travel alone, as a couple or the whole family, Maui has a motorhome for you. Maui, home where you roam.
Bada bang, bada boom. Oh, she's going to run after impalas. She's running after impalas. All right, everybody, that is our cue.
My full name is Mpho Tikani. I grew up in Soweto. My first animal that I filmed, Cedric Dodd. Okay, no, wait. My first animal that I filmed, I think it was an impala. Best sighting ever, I would say it was actually this year, 2024. But it was this Cedric when we had Mulwati and TP on a warthog kill. I think we have to cut it.
When adventure calls, answer with Brits. Take on Southern Africa's most breathtaking landscapes from behind the wheel of a fully equipped 4x4 or SUV. From tents and bedding to a fridge and full kitchen gear, everything you need is already on board. And with 24-hour roadside assistance, you're free to go further and explore with confidence. Open roads, total freedom, no limits, just the journey ahead. Brits, equipped for adventure.
From time to time. Of course, the biggest threat for a lot of migrating birds is a lot of the places they travel through, they are persecuted by people either for food or sometimes the pet trade, etc. But for example, in areas in the Middle East, etc., a lot of birds are still hunted, and it's quite unfortunate because these birds are maybe protected and safe in the places where they end up, but on the way they are still persecuted and caught, etc., or hunted for food. So there is a lot of work going on through BirdLife International to protect these corridors or allow migratory birds to have safe routes of passage to where they need to get to. Just one of the awesome conservation bodies doing a lot of work for birds across the globe. You can see the storks seem to be shifting from that roosting behavior now ever so slightly starting to forage again, walking around looking a bit and seeing what they can snap up. Obviously temperatures are ever so slightly starting to decrease. Marianne, thank you very much for the kind words. It's always a pleasure for me to enjoy nature alongside all of you and have interesting discussions, of course. Darkman Lover, also thank you for joining. It was certainly an afternoon of bird watching, but it's nice we get to enjoy the whole picture of nature. It's also nice to notice the changes that we're seeing throughout the seasons at the various waterholes currently. But from my side, thanks again everyone for tuning in. which I'll see you in the not too distant future. Enjoy this afternoon's drive. I'm sure it'll be filled with lots of action and exciting things. This morning was quite beautiful. But thanks again everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.